Turn over to Isaiah chapter 55. We're going to check on your thinking tonight. Sometimes our thinking is not exactly the way it should be. I think of a title for this thing. Part of it might be what we're going to find out with Abraham, what he said one time. He said, I thought. Naaman the Syrian, when he got cured of his leprosy, he said, I thought. Well, also, I thought about another thing, a title for it was, what was I thinking? You ever done something, you wonder, why did I do that, or what was I thinking when I did those things? Well, look at Isaiah chapter 55, verse 8 down in verse 9. This is what God says concerning our thinking. My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Thank you. Be seated here. It should not be any surprise to us that God's thoughts are above our thoughts. And God is not bragging here. He's just making a statement concerning His thinking. It is to compel us to examine our thought processes and see how we need to consider or think about our thinking. I say if you do not put Jesus in the equation, it's a mathematical kind of thing. If you don't put Jesus in the equation, it's not going to balance. Here, most of us have had times in our lives where, we look back and we ask ourselves, what was I thinking when I did that? I've wondered several times why I made the decisions that I did when Linda and I moved back here. That's called hindsight. I just have to trust that during the times that those things were going on, God was doing the thinking. God was doing the moving of circumstances. And I have to trust in that. I think of several reasons why God's thinking surpasses us. One of them is we don't have complete information. We make decisions lots of times, but we do not have complete information. Sometimes you make decisions on what you know, but you find out later you didn't know enough. Not only that, we do not have power that God has. I can think of something, I can manufacture it in my mind to do something, but I do not always have the power to accomplish that. Whereas God, in His circumstances, that's part of the things of God. Omniscience and omnipotence, that God is all-knowing, He's all-powerful. I don't have the power to bring about some things that I think about or the circumstances. I remember the night that I reported into Parris Island when we were going to go to boot camp. I got on a bus in Charleston, South Carolina, flew down to there, and this bus is full. You can imagine 19, 20-year-old guys, every one of us, and everybody's going on, all these things, it's a commotion, it's a racket, it's a bedlam on this thing, because there's 30 or 40 of us. And we turned in where the gate is there, and we turned in that thing, and it got so quiet you could hear a pin drop. And I'm pretty sure a lot of them at that point was saying to themselves, what was I thinking? Now, in my case, I had done my study, and I thought I'd looked, and I knew what we was going to face for the most part. So it wasn't a surprise for me. I knew what to expect. But sometimes when we have something that we don't expect, because of what we did, we wonder, what in the world was I thinking in circumstances like that? I think what God said to Israel, I'm going to read something in the book of Jeremiah, and this is right before they're going into captivity. And I'm pretty sure if you'd have said at that time, God loves us, God cares for us, everybody would say, well, no, we don't, or we wouldn't be going through this. Understand something. God does what's right. God does what's proper, whether you like it or not. Jeremiah, for I know that this is what God said through Jeremiah. I know that the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace, not of evil, to give you an expected end. Well, God has to, because of their sin, this is because of their sin. They blame God, but the fact of the matter is, it's because of their sin, their iniquity, that they're having to go through this. But God is going to bring them out on the other side of this thing, and He's still going to bring Israel out on the other side of all the circumstances we see going through this thing today. I think we need to get our processes, our thought processes down in according to the Word of God and be thinking what's written here. I mentioned Naaman in 2 Kings chapter 5. David done a lot of teaching out of 2 Kings in the outdoor meetings. The story of Naaman. Naaman is a big wheel in the Syrian army. He's next to the king. So this is a big man. But he's got leprosy, which is a hindrance in a lot of circumstances. But he's got a little Jewish girl there that told her, Naaman's wife, if he just go down to Israel, a prophet down there would recover him of his leprosy. So what the king of, every time I read this, I think it's funny. The king of Syria writes a letter to the king of Israel and sends him down to him. Well, she said, go to the prophet. Well, the king of Israel down there, he's got a problem. He don't know what to do. And Elisha just sends him a message and says, you send him over to me. I know what to do. Let me read here. This is 2 Kings 5:9. Naaman came with his horses, with his chariot, and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. Elisha sent a messenger unto him, saying, go and wash in Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee. Thou shalt be clean. Well, that's not how Naaman had it all planned out in his mind. Naaman was wroth and went away and said, behold, I thought he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and strike his hand over the place and recover the leper. And we know the story of this because he had men with him and said, listen, if he'd have told you to do something difficult, you'd have done it. How hard is it just to go and dip in Jordan? He said, I got better rivers up in Damascus. Maybe they are, I don't know, but I might news for you. It's like when studying the thing with Elijah. God told Elijah to go down to the brook Cherith. And the ravens fed him there for, I don't know how long. He could have went someplace else and said, well, God, you need to bring it here because this is a better place. Now, God's going to send it where his will is. He's going to do this thing like he had. And he finally listened to the folks that was with him, and he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, and he got cleansed. But he said, I thought. He had it all planned out, and God just didn't do it the way he thought it ought to happen. Well, the Pharisees and the Sadducees in Jesus' day were the same way. The Lord just didn't do it their way. He continually refused to do it their way. We're living in a nation today that's trying to bend God's will to their will. That's not how it works. You can spit in the face of the Almighty all you want to, but it's going to come out where your thinking is not going to work. God, like with the nation of Israel, he allowed them to go so far, they went in captivity. God allows so much so far, and he's going to put a stop to it. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were expecting him to come in and get them those hated Romans out of here and all those circumstances. Let me tell you something. They got, what was it the Lord called them? He called them a whited sepulcher, whitewashed tombstones or whatever. They were thinking wrong. They thought God had to do it their way. He does not have to do it their way. He gave it through the prophets. I'm amazed sometimes. I read here a while back, I think he used it in a sermon. King Ahab. God's decreed he's going to die. And he calls the prophet up, and everybody's telling him, oh yeah, you're going to be successful. Go out and fight them Syrians. God's going to bless. God's going to bless. God's going to bless. You can say that all you want to in the churches of America, and we have plenty of pastors saying that, but I got news for you. If you're living an ungodly lifestyle, don't expect God to bless it. Yeah. Churches today, Methodist churches in a turmoil and split because they're going to ordain homosexuals in the pulpits. A lot of the churches are leaving. You say, well, that's terrible. It's terrible that they have to. But my Bible tells me it's an abomination. So why are you going to accept that? And people think that because we're going to decide that we're going to do this, God's just going to have to change his opinion. He does not need to do that. There's a thought today that God has come to bring us, and I've read this, Matthew chapter 10. I'm going to read something here. And I've read this before in our hearing because some people have the wrong idea. Oh, Jesus come to bring peace. He come to bring us love and all those things. Well, God does love us. But that doesn't mean he loved Israel, but he still sent them into captivity. He loved Israel in the wilderness, and thousands of them died over what was it? My mind just went blank. All that were 20 years old and upward when they came out of Egypt died in the wilderness. Why? Because they thought that they knew better than what God did. This is again in Matthew chapter 10. Think not. That's what the Lord is saying. He says, pay attention. Think not that I'm come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. I'm come to set a man at variance against his father, the daughter against her mother, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's foes shall be they of his own household. This is a reality. In many parts of this world, when a person gets saved, say in India or in one of the Muslim countries, he automatically is cast out of his family, everything. Many of them are killed, beaten, and everything else. Why? They turn to Jesus instead of the faults that they've been, You can see it still here today. Because if you turn your life over to God, you're going to lose people. You're going to lose them sometimes in your family. You lose them sometime on the job. Friends or people that you've known all your life. You're going to find out they're no longer in fellowship with you. You say, that's terrible. It's terrible, but that's the way it's going to be. And that's the way it has to be. Paul, this is Acts chapter 14. He says something to the church to alert them to the circumstances, and people just don't believe. They've forgotten. We got so complacent in America because we assume because it's been like this, it's going to continue like that. This is Acts chapter 14. Confirming the souls of the disciples, exhorting them to continue in the faith, that we must through much tribulation enter in the kingdom of God. Well, in America, we don't preach that in most of our churches. We don't tell people that just because that you got saved, everything's going to be smooth from now on. Everybody's going to love you and all those things. Excuse me. Dry tonight. If we willfully disobey the will of God and make wrong decisions, and all of a sudden it turns bad, don't blame God. First of all, let's look at some people here. Achan, young man, the nation of Israel has come out of Egypt. They crossed the Jordan River. They come up on Jericho. God's given him instructions on how to do this, and it's outright foolish. March around the city one time for 6 days, and then the seventh day they do it 7 times, then they shout and blow the trumpets and the wall falls. I mean, you don't conquer walled cities in those days and circumstances. But yet God said, this is all you have to do. That's faith. And they did just exactly those things. 1 John 5:4, how do you overcome the world? I'm going to tell you. Whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world. This is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. The walls of Jericho fell down flat because of faith. Now the weapon was used against it, but God told him something. Jericho was the type of the world. He said, you don't get anything there. I'm pretty sure some of us looking maybe to get some booty, some treasure, whatever. God said, everything there belongs to me. You can't have anything. This is 1 John 2:16. This is a principle. All that's in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but it's of the world. I read this morning, the God of this world blinds minds. Satan is the God of this world, the world system. The Bible tells me the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. This earth is his. The world systems is the devil. The world passeth away, and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. Jericho stood as a type of the world. We took on 3 enemies when we got saved. The world, the flesh, and the devil. Jericho is the world. The next little city that they're going to deal with is called Ai. It's the flesh. Well, they decided in the book of Joshua, this is what it said in Joshua 7:3. Let not all the people go up, but let about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up to smite Ai, and make not all the people labor thither there but few. There's a principle involved here. The principle involved is you cannot conquer the flesh by half measures. It's going to take everything that you've got. It's faith that overcomes the world, but you're going to have to do a battle with the flesh every day of your life. This young man Achan, he saw something and he took it. Well, they come up to Ai and 36 men died. You say, well, that's not many. When I was in the Marine Corps, when I was in Vietnam, you get this thing about light casualties. Well, they ain't light if they're your family, your friends. Believe me. And they chased them from before the gate, even unto cherubim, and smote them in the going down, wherefore the hearts of the people melted and became as water. You know what Joshua did? Joshua went back and fell on his knees and blamed God. He says, what are we going to do, God, when we turn our backs on our enemies and we're getting defeated and all those things? And I love this part of it. God looked down on him. He's on his knees. He's praying. He's blaming God. God says, Israel hath sinned. 75 years ago, this country was footing the bill for this world. After the close of the World War II, we practically rebuilt Europe on our own nickel, on our own dime. Marshall Plan. Germany's in ruins. I've seen what it looked like after we got through bombing German cities. It's just rubble. We rebuilt it. Same thing in Japan. We rebuilt it. Not today. We're borrowing today, and we're in debt so far in we'll never see upside. Why? Somewhere along the line we forgot God. Israel hath sinned. They stoned Achan, and he died, but for a little bit of nothing that he'd stolen out of Jericho. The fact that the church as a whole and our local congregations, we face victory or defeat together. Because the church is one. Yes, we are divided into denominational things. But the church is one. But God judges individual congregations. He told that, and I read that this morning there in Corinth. That church had a man living. He's coming to church. And that's the thing today. We expect the ungodly to live ungodly. If you're going to come to church and live let's use that phrase, live like the devil, what are you going to do? Well, Paul said, I got a solution to the problem. He said, I'm going to turn him over to Satan for the destruction of the flesh. He's living with his stepmother. And Paul said, it's commonly reported among you. It wasn't something that's hidden. And Paul looked at the church. He said, you either judge this man, or he said, God will judge the whole church. I know that we have a responsibility in the church. The Apostle Paul spoke about leaven. Now, I've preached enough about leaven. It's a false doctrine, wickedness, and all those things. Paul said to purge out the old leaven. I've said before, I was started tonight to do another one of those feast days and do Pentecost. I'm going to wait till Wednesday night for that. But we're living in the days of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We're supposed to be unleavened. America used to be more unleavened than it is today, but Paul said a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. We're supposed to be living in the days of unleavened bread. We're talking about the church, not the world. We're talking about the church. The church today needs to have rid of the leaven of false doctrines and all those things, wickedness, and all that circumstance. Leavened bread tastes better, but that's the problem. Achan. He did not accept what God said and thought he could hide it. As long as nobody knew about it, he'd be okay, but God knew. Secondly, Abraham. Abraham is a manifest. If you read Hebrews chapter 11, there is so much about Abraham in there. And I read in the book of Genesis about Abraham and what all he did and all those things. Paul brings us over to the New Testament. Said he is still our father by faith. But Abraham had a problem one time. He thought, God is too small. Let's read something. Genesis chapter 20, verse 10. Let's give you the setting here. Abraham's gone down to Abimelech because there's been a little famine. And he's doing, this is the second time. He's already done it once when he went down to Egypt. He looks at his wife, who's Sarah is a beautiful woman, and she's 90-something years old. She's 90 years old when she has Isaac. She ain't even 90 years old yet. She is so beautiful. Abraham says, we'll tell them that you're my sister, or they're going to kill me just to take you. Well, he got caught. There's a thing about lying. You usually get caught. I don't know who said it. There was a fellow that said this. He said, as long as you tell the truth, you don't have to have a good memory. If you tell a lot of lies, you better have a good memory because you got to remember what you said. Abimelech said unto Abraham, what sawest thou that thou hast done this thing? Abraham said, well, notice, because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. We know what Abraham's thinking. He thought wrong. He thought, surely to goodness, God is not down here. God is too small to take care of me down here with this crowd of the Gentiles, the ungodly. Well, you need to understand something. God's not restricted as to place, time, or anything. Sometimes we think God's so small he can't take care of our circumstances. Well, he can. Also, I said, this is the second time Abraham's done this. He got caught the other time too. He also taught it to his son Isaac. Isaac did it. Sometimes age is supposed to add a little wisdom to our life. Sometimes it does, but listen, because of the weakness of our flesh and our failing years, sometimes we forget that God still can. Deuteronomy 31 verse 6. This is what Moses told Joshua. By the way, Joshua's got a tough thing to accomplish. Taking the nation of Israel, a bunch of herdsmen, farmers, they've been making brick down in Egypt. They are not an army. I'm not even sure they had any weapons. Be strong and of a good courage. Fear not, nor be afraid of them, for the Lord thy God, He it is that doth go with thee. He will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. And he repeats it later on there in the book of Deuteronomy. Joshua passed it on to the people. He said the same thing to them. As long as God's with us, we're okay. But you begin to think sometimes that there's a limit to what God can do and where God can move. I look around today and I don't see much hope for the church. I said this morning, the church today is not the church of 45 years ago when I started preaching. It's surely not the one of 100 years ago. We make excuses today. Oh, you just don't know the situation in the society and everything. Let me tell you something. The Apostle Paul labored in a bunch that was worse than anything that we can think of today. There's no limit to the power of God because it's the same Spirit. That's the dynamic today. David in Psalm 139, he gives us a good view of the vastness of God. I want to read this in Psalm 139, verse 5. David had a good view. Now, I'm going to get to David in just a minute. He wasn't always on top of things. Sometimes he's just like us. He's human. He's on top for a while, and all of a sudden, his faith gets small. Psalm 139, I don't know when he wrote it either. Thou hast beset me behind and before, and laid thine hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain to it. Think about that. Does God care what happens to you? I think he does. Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell or the grave, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thine hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. That's an enlarged view of the God that we serve. We are able to face circumstances by trusting in Him. I got another. I want to read this in Isaiah chapter 46. Linda and I've been going on this thing 40. We're working 47 years. When I started this, Mary, I was a young fellow. It was a rude awakening one time when I understood that I wasn't one of those young preachers they kept talking about. I didn't outgrown that. Isaiah chapter 46. Hearken unto me, O house of Jacob, all the remnant of the house of Israel, which are born by me from the belly, he's meaning from birth, which are carried from the womb. Even to your old age I am He. Even to hoar hairs will I carry you. I have made, and I will bury you, and I will carry, and I will deliver you. I still got all my hair, but it is turning a different color. So we need to understand something. Just because we're older, I cannot leap tall buildings at a single bound anymore. It's a hard thing to understand. But we need to understand God is still there. I want to read something in Genesis chapter 20. This is how Abraham was rebuked by the ungodly or by an unbeliever. Let's put it that way. Because Abimelech seems to be like a good man, except he's just an outcast. But this is what he says. And unto Sarah he said, behold, I've given thy brother. Notice. He's being very, I don't want to use the word facetious, but he's poking fun at them. I've given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of eyes, and to all that are within, and with all other. Thus she was reproved. Now you can go your own way, and you'll find out somewhere along the line God will reprove your actions. Thirdly, let's look at David. 1 Samuel 27. This is towards the end of David's running from Saul. It's not going to be just a short time to find out that Saul is going to be dead. David's going to be not having him chase him. But 1 Samuel 27 verse 1. David said in his heart, I shall not perish one day by the hand of Saul. There's nothing better for me than I should speedily escape to the land of the Philistines. And Saul shall despair of me to seek me any more in any coast of Israel. So shall I escape out of his hand. David arose and passed over with the 600 men that were with him unto Achish, the son of Maoch, king of Gath. David is essentially saying, I think, sometimes like David, our thinking is wrong. David said in his heart. You know, there's people that still say, just follow your heart. Every time I hear somebody say that, I say, yeah, and you find out you might be in the ditch. Jeremiah said the heart's deceitful, meaning it will lie to you. God had already anointed him king. He kept him safe for all those circumstances. He seems to forget that. We need to have a good memory. If God's taking care of me, and He did years ago when Linda and I were raising 2 kids, and all the circumstances that had to do with that, He took care of us sins. And I believe He can do it now. We do not know as we get older what, say, medical conditions that we're going to face in our old age. We just have to have confidence that God is still there. He can still keep His promise. He promised David He's going to be king. He's anointed king. Listen, he just needs to rest on it. Sometime, somewhere along the line, we need to understand that God is still in control of the circumstances in our life. Yeah. Sometimes we need a poor memory. Sometimes we need a good memory to remember what God has done for us. Yeah. Let's get some things here. Psalm 78, verse 19. Let's go back to the nation of Israel for just a moment. Psalm 78 is an indictment against the nation of Israel. It's essentially, again, another history lesson. Well, Stephen tried that and they stoned him. He didn't accuse them of anything. He just read their history. And as he read their history, you know what happened? Every one of them found themselves failing the same way that their fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers did. Yea, they spake against God. They said, can God furnish a table in the wilderness? Well, He did, but He didn't do it like they wanted to. They wanted flesh one time, And Moses went to God. God said, okay, I'll take care of you. I give you bread in the morning and flesh that you're going to eat on for a month. Moses looked at God, or didn't, I guess he looked at it. He said, if we used to slaughter all of the animals that we have, you couldn't do that, God. That's just way. And then we have the story about the migration of the quail coming over just high enough off the ground that they can knock them down, and they knocked them down, and they knocked them down, and they ate for a month. But it said he sent leanness to their flesh. In America, we've eaten good. I was raised on pinto beans and fried potatoes and pinto beans. My mama could make some of the best biscuits. I'm a pretty good biscuit maker. My mama, when we go up to visit, she'd have biscuits left over from breakfast, and they'd still be good that afternoon. I can't get them that good hardly. I told my mom one time, I said, Mama, I was up in school. I was up in my teens. I told her that we need to have more meat. I'd learned that we had to have protein. She said, them beans are full of protein, son. And they are. I was in Vietnam. I said when I left home, if I never have another pinto beans, I'll be one time too soon. And after a few months, and we was over there every once in a while, that cook would make up a big mess of pinto beans. And I'd eat till I was going to die. God can. They said, can God furnish a table in the wilderness? Well, yes, he can. David, in his lapse and thinking what he'd follow his heart, he lost all of his family. While they're over there where he'd gone to, the king over there gave him a little town to live in. All of a sudden, they come up and take everybody in the town. Not, took everything that was worth anything and took everybody there, and they're going to sell them in slavery. David said, what are we going to do? This is what it said. This is 1 Samuel 30, verse 8. David inquired at the Lord, saying, shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake him? And he answered, pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake him, without fail recover all. That's what he should have done in the first place. I mean, I ought to always pray and not to faint. If we did more praying, we'd do less fainting. Because what happens is we didn't pray, we went on our own thing. James said, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God. And he will tell us, in the circumstances we have need of, God can answer the circumstances. We have a lapse of faith. Let's close with this thought. When we accepted Jesus, did we think everything is going to be great from then on? Now, you can get you get saved in a lot of churches in America. Well, they're teaching you that God wants you to have a blessing. God wants you to have everything. He wants you to have cars. He wants you to have homes. Let me tell you something. If you can't preach that in Africa, you can't preach it here. I've told the story many times about when folks of it all years ago, they'd gone down to Dominica to be with a missionary down there and help him out in some things. And that woman come in praising God in that evening prayer meeting because some rat come through the house. And she was praising God because she had meat that night. I mean, many a squirrels. In reality, it's a big rat with a bushy tail. When we accepted Jesus, we took on 3 enemies. We need to understand something. That is what we're going to face. The gospel ship that we sing about is not a cruise ship. I've never wanted to go on a cruise. Don and Mary's been on them. And Keith and Michelle, they love them and everything. I've never had a desire to be on a cruise ship. Well, God didn't put us on a cruise ship. I look around today and I think, Lord, you just can't do anything in this day. People are just so wicked, just so this, that, and the other. You can't do anything. Let me tell you something. God is still able. We're supposed to be giving ourselves to God. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what is a good, precious will of God. if we were doing more of what Paul wrote in Romans chapter 12, we'd be doing less whining about our circumstances. I read here a while back, Esperanza gave me the book. It was about, and I think David read it too. It was about establishing the church in Ethiopia back before World War II. Most people don't know that before Hitler did all those things, Mussolini had already invaded Ethiopia and killed hundreds of thousands of people. And but the church was there. But see, Italy was Roman Catholic. They couldn't stand anybody that wasn't Catholic. So they killed a lot of them, persecuted them. What was amazing to me as I read this, there were several different dialects, languages in Ethiopia. There was the main primary one, but a lot of the people did not speak that language. There was a Bible, and I'm assuming it's probably Catholic put out, in that language, but they couldn't read it. But I read about a missionary, and he reached a lot of people. They knew two things. Some people, they just don't read the word. They didn't have it to read, but they knew two things. Number one, Jesus died for their sins. They knew that. And number two, that he was coming back. They did not know a lot of things that we know because we've got a Bible, we can read it. They didn't have that. But they knew that Jesus had died, and they knew he's coming back. They just lived faithfully. Beaten, everything. And I look at us today in America, we've got so much, and we still, so many people in America are thinking, well, God's just going to have to follow our lead. Society says that homosexuality is fine. God calls it abomination. He calls it unnatural. If you don't know where that's at, ask me, I'll tell you. Romans, the first chapter of Romans, read it. We're having adultery and fornication openly in the church. Couples living one another, not married, and in the church. And we just overlook it. Pastor don't want to preach on that. That's where we're at today. That's where our thinking has gone wrong. We think God will just ignore it. No, he won't. He put up with it a long time. He's patient. That's what the Bible says. God's long-suffering to us. We're not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. He's long-suffering and he's patient. My thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways. That's what God says. And we just think he'll bow to our thinking and our ways. And God says, no, I won't. No, I won't. God's great enough. Like Abraham found out that and David, he could not go anywhere that God was not